It says live.
Oh, what happened to my phone call?
Thanks for joining us. If you're here right now, we're just sorting things out, making everything's working just fine.
It seems to be delayed.
Yeah, it will be delayed. This is
Your what?
the stream.
Oh. Okay. Well, you don't have to. I just I think we're live streaming now, actually.
Okay, there's nothing exciting going on just yet. We'll be getting started in just a moment. Sound is good. We're ready to go.
Awesome. This is riveting stuff. You Weisenheimer, you. We're setting it up and we're telling everybody to watch. You know, all 50 of our friends.
All right. We
Let me
want to
see.
get started.
Breaks optional show, live stream. Let me see.
Yeah, I did go and test. You can hear it. The microphone sounds good. It's picking all of us up just fine. Do we need it louder?
Oh, we're good.
Okay.
That's going to give us an extra view.
I was
right.
not doing the same thing.
Well, welcome back to Breaks Optional. It has been a long time since we did our last episode, which was a disaster, unmitigated.
Yeah. We decided to pare it back and start a little bit smaller. I think we're going to be a bit more successful if we try not to complicate the technology too much yet. We can do that later.
Yeah, right now we're all here together. It's great. Some of the
Okay.
I guess we've had a lot of great news lately. Elroy now lives just 30 minutes down the road instead of halfway across the country.
Yeah,
I'm pretty excited for that.
for sure. Because that has implications for other plans that we have, because we're wanting to do what we're going to call Breaks Optional Impracticals, where we actually build stuff. And so we've been beefing up the tools that we have at our disposal, and I've been insulating my garage so that we can actually work in there without freezing our flanges off. And so hopefully in the next month or two we'll have our first impractical.
Oh, yeah, I'm excited for that.
Yeah.
I love building stuff. Building it on camera, I'm not quite sure yet how we're going to work that. Because we're going to need a bleep button.
I don't think we're going to do it live.
Okay.
Yeah. So Lewis wanted me to send him a link to it.
A link?
Oh, okay. The good news is, obviously, anybody that I'm talking to here, you're going to know this already, or at least have access to it. If you just look up Breaks Optional, it'll just show right up that we're doing a live stream.
All right, I will send out a link. You'll get it here in a minute, Elroy.
Okay.
Oh, and my good news is that I have finally finished my master's degree. And so I don't have that weighing over my head anymore. So I don't feel any smarter than I used to, unfortunately. But now I can at least tell my friends when I come across them, I can quote Darth Vader and say, let's see,
I think I've
before you were the master, I was the pupil, I'm the master now.
John is officially the fourth holder of a master's degree in our house.
That's pretty
or
cool.
our family.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah. Okay. Copy link. All right. We didn't spread this one out widely because we knew it was going to be a little rough.
A little slow to start.
Yes.
And we were doing some testing, making sure that this is going to work out just fine. I'm excited because I've had a bit more experience doing streaming, and so I'm trying out some of the things that I've learned. Hopefully, this will mean that as we move forward, we can get some better quality stuff, but we'll see. Shall we get started?
Here
Or
we go.
are we still waiting for our
There,
fan?
I sent the link out to, all 3 people that I know.
Which is about a third more than our fan base.
Yep. In fact, I think our fan is here. Our fan lives in this
Yes.
house.
That's right.
And unfortunately, she can't even watch the show right now because I have, well, maybe I'll start this way. We'll talk about some geeky technical stuff. I took some time. I got a Raspberry Pi from a friend of mine where we used to live. And
That is not a fruit-filled pastry.
The electronic one, not the pastry one.
yes. So a little tiny computer that's about this big. This big. We were using it for a media server on our computer before, but then I took it and I switched it out and turned it into what's called a Pi hole. And its whole objective is that it takes what's coming from the outside world and filters it on your network. So my whole network here is filtered for ads. But one of the things it does is that it filters live content, which is a little frustrating sometimes.
Oh, okay. So Rosalie asked if we're going to watch the chat while we're doing
yeah, we
this.
can do that.
You got it on that one?
Yep, I can
Okay.
pull it right up.
Oh,
look at that!
hey, we got a like. Okay,
Any dislikes yet?
no dislikes.
Not even from Finland?
We haven't insulted them yet.
Oh, yeah.
But the evening's young. Oh, hey. So John had some good news career-wise with his master's degree. I've got some. For me, it's really exciting career news. Let me start out that 20 years ago, I was going to school to become a mechanical engineer, and life happened, and I wasn't able to reach that goal, and I had to stop going to school and start working full time. But just recently, I got a job title change at my work, so I am a process engineer. So I don't know. I'm pretty excited about that. I'm an engineer finally.
No, that's really cool because that used to happen a lot more frequently, that somebody that was a technician would be promoted to the position of engineer just from experience. That just doesn't happen very often anymore. And so I'm actually really stoked about that, and that speaks to a real level of technical proficiency. And so, yeah, good job.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's exciting stuff. And like it didn't hit me immediately. When I got the new job title, I thought that job title sounds pretty cool. And then it was probably a few days later, all of a sudden I'm like, wait a minute, that was my goal when I was going to school. I wanted to become an engineer, and I got there by a different route. I'm pretty excited about that.
Yeah.
No. Well, if it makes you feel any better, our fan, actually she's our sister. She says she'll call me Master John, and she'll call you Engineer Damon.
Okay, deal.
Now that you're an engineer, you've got to wear the old coveralls with blue pinstripes on them. That's how it works.
One of the guys that I work with wears those style overalls.
Really?
Yeah. People don't wear them very much. And anybody that knows our father, that knew our father, he wore bib overalls.
Yeah.
Yeah, bib overalls like almost every day.
Yep.
And so they
But they weren't pinstriped.
not pinstripe. Yeah.
And where that comes from is the old-timey steam engines. The engineer would, at least that's how I always envisioned it, was the engineer would wear pinstripe.
Yeah, just like
overalls.
back in the day, all criminals would always wear the pinstripes too, and the little mask.
Ooh, tangent time. Speaking of
Wait, that wasn't the tangent.
tangent on a tangent. Do you know why airline pilots wear the uniforms that they do?
No.
So, at the beginning of commercial aviation, there wasn't a standard uniform. The pilots were, grungy mechanic types that, like race car drivers, like smelled of gasoline and smoke. And the airlines figured out that, wait a minute, we want to sell this as an experience. And so what we're going to do is we're going to give our pilots, we're going to give our airplane drivers cool names that are reminiscent of like maritime. So pilot was thought up by the airlines, and then I don't know which airline it was, but one of them came up with this idea. Hey, wait, we're gonna make it this like an experience, and so our pilots are gonna wear like sea captain uniforms.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, it's something that everybody at the time recognized. That's the captain.
Oh, you're the captain of
You're the captain of the ship.
airship.
And exactly, so that's what they did, and it stuck. And so airline pilots still wear that same uniform.
Oh, that's
Right, so
interesting.
good marketing.
Smart.
Yeah.
Yeah, learn some of that.
Yeah.
Oh, like and subscribe.
Yeah.
And click the notification button.
Oh, we got 2 likes. That's good. That's one more than what we've ever gotten. That is a 100% improvement.
It's a good metrics. I don't like the pressure for future shows though.
Oh yeah.
All right.
Maybe we should just try for 1 more like per show instead of
Oh, there we go.
100% more likes.
Yeah.
If we get 2 likes per show, then I'm good.
Okay,
Well, should we jump into the
let's do it.
nerddom?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. I imagine right now kind of the wavy lines of
The wavy lines of nerddom.
Yes. Adjust your glasses, everybody.
glasses.
There we go.
Of course, you had to go and get LASIK.
Yeah.
I got kicked out of the Nerd Glasses Club.
Yeah, but now you can't
No.
read close up.
I can't read close up. I lost that superpower. But I think I still get to stay in the nerddom because they used lasers to fix my eyes. They shot me in the eyes with lasers powerful enough to make it so that I could smell my own burning lenses. It smelled like burning hair.
Okay, I guess
Oh.
that counts.
Yeah, you get your superpowers from a laser. I guess, yeah.
I thought the lasers were supposed to come out of your eyes.
Well, that's why I lost my superpower. My one and only superpower was that I could read microscope close, and now I can't. Now I have to hold things out here when I read them. So I lost my superpower because the lasers went into my eyes. If they would have came out of my eyes, I would have gained the superpower. Science. Look it up.
All right. Well, who wants to get started with the with nerdy news?
Well, I'm just hoping I don't have the same news article that you guys have.
I suspect you probably don't.
Okay.
I have memes, not not news today. So
Okay, good. So, what do you guys want to go first? Oh, wait.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
You're going to beat later. Still the same thing.
okay.
On 3.
Wait.
Wait.
Okay, you go first because you're tallest.
All right, I'll go first. Okay, here's my news. My news, I guess, if you haven't figured it out yet, I'm a big fan of retro video games.
Because he's
and
tall.
Ignore him. Yes, a big fan of retro video games. And so one of the things that I love doing is that retro pie that I had before, I'd also turned it into, or that Raspberry Pi before that I had, turned it into a RetroPie, which basically allows you to take a bunch of ROMs, stick it on there, and you can emulate old games. I don't know how much of that
ROM?
is. So a ROM is on the old Super Nintendo or Nintendo or Sega games. You would have, I guess what's the best way to describe this? You'd have a bunch of chips inside of that little cartridge. What the ROM is you stick that cartridge into a reader and you can pull all the information out of there, and it's just kind of all the information that chip held.
On the bottom of your screen, you can see ROM equals read-only memory.
Yes,
So
that too.
it's memory that would just, you could read from it, but you can't write to it.
Right. So, yes, that's the.
But it evolved to mean more than just that.
Right, because you're taking the information from the ROM of the cartridge and you're turning that into this little file, which they have a lot of names. Like for Nintendo, it's just like .NES, or for Sega, often it's .bin, stuff like that. But we just usually just call them a ROM. And so you can take those, stick them on your computer, and you can run an emulator that acts like the software itself. Or you can, like in my case, I've got that little Raspberry Pi, and I put all those on there, and then I can just plug it into my TV, and I've got a little tiny box that allows me to play all the games that I legally own. I avoid pirating stuff, but yeah, all the games that I legally own, I just run on there, and you can pull them up, play them whenever you want.
So you put this all on the Raspberry Pi or Retro Pi.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's all on there. It's all working great. But there are a few caveats that come with that. And one of them is that whenever you're running emulation, because all that stuff that used to run in hardware, even though it was, kind of antiquated hardware now, but all that stuff used to run in hardware and you had all this logic that was running in parallel with each other. So even though it's slower than the computers we have now, oftentimes the response time of your input to the actions on the screen was a lot quicker than
Really?
emulation.
So, yeah, that surprises me. So emulation, you get lag.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Because
interesting.
especially where, like, usually you're using a USB controller or a Bluetooth controller,
Okay.
and that's adding lag, because USB sends packets, and it has to interpret those packets, and then it takes that information, sends it to the computer, and then the computer interprets that and puts it into the engine that it's trying to emulate, and then your character does the action.
Oh, interesting. So I imagine that if the only lag you had was from the USB controller or Bluetooth controller or whatever, you wouldn't notice it. But maybe if you start stacking lag up, then it becomes perceptible.
Mm-hmm.
Is that?
Yeah, it's like every little thing, bit after bit after bit, where you're trying to emulate in software something that hardware that was usually running very parallel to each other. Every time that you have a process that's trying to process that, it can cause just a little bit of slowdown.
So the old game processors they weren't just a simple RISC computer. They weren't processing just a single program or single command one at a time in series. They had multiple logic sections that could do commands at the same time.
Yeah, now I don't claim to be an expert on like circuit boards or anything like that, but oftentimes you'd have like your sound processor over here, and then you've got your main CPU over here, and then you've got, I don't know what other chips you would have, but sometimes those things are what cause the problems, is because your circuit board splits off into a whole bunch of different chips, and this one's in charge of handling one thing, while this one's handling another thing. In an emulator, you can have parallel cores and stuff like that where you can mitigate some of these problems, but because of that parallelism that's naturally there on the board, it just happened almost as quick as you hit the button, your sprite would respond on the screen.
Oh, so your response time And some of the emulated games, you can get just a little bit of lag, huh?
Mhm.
Oh, that is fascinating. Even though the computing power is orders of magnitude faster.
That's so interesting. Yeah.
Huh.
Most people aren't going to notice. Like a casual player isn't going to notice most of the time.
Those noobs.
I've never noticed. I've never played one of these games.
And most games that I play, I don't notice. But the times that I did notice is playing games that I was very familiar with as a child on the Nintendo or the Sega. So like playing Sonic
Yeah.
or playing Mega Man, especially Nintendo games had a reputation for being like you want Twitch reaction speeds. As soon as you see something going on, you want to be able to react immediately. Mega Man is really hard on an emulator. Harder than I remember. And maybe it's my old age, but
That's what I was just going to suggest.
yeah, well,
Checking into.
ignore him.
So a little bit of a tangent from that. I understand that my younger siblings used to all gather around the television in the living room to watch Damon play video games. And I never was sure why that was, and wondered if maybe you could enlighten us.
How we would gather around to watch Damon play video games?
I have a theory, real quickly. I'm gonna throw it out there, and then we'll see. I am a jerk, and I hogged the controller. There you go. Go. Is that why?
You know what? I think you hit it on the nose. One of our viewers, Gimli.
Oh,
Sorry
that
if
would be Leroy's.
butchered. Oh, okay. Oh, Gimli.
Gimli, okay.
He suggests that the CRT screens also have less latency, and that's definitely true. So
Really?
the
Okay.
hardware itself in the old consoles,
It's
plus
just an
the
analog
CRT,
input.
yeah, that all
Digital
have very low
processing
latency.
happening. Yeah.
So
Okay.
so I was imagining though, like burn-in, like it doesn't it take a while for
No, it's 30 frames a second on a
Okay.
CRT, old CRT. Yeah, that's the
Okay.
NTSC, National Television. NTSC. What does it stand for? Anyway, that's the broadcasting format. Was they would broadcast 30 frames per second, and it's all analog, and so that's what you would feed into the.
So that was a
television.
broadcasting format,
Mm-hmm.
but oftentimes, like those old consoles in NTSC would run at 60 frames per second, if I recall.
wow.
Or in PAL regions, you'd have 50 frames per second.
Which is Europe.
Yeah, Europe. Thank you. Yeah, I should clarify that. And so,
Also, okay. I just had one of those realizations. I thought that they had the region locks or the regions for video game hardware was just an annoyance. But I guess maybe it was a compatibility with the television issue and not just we're going to make your life more difficult.
Yes, also.
Yes.
yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah, it was both. Like you've got competing. You have Nintendo of America, you have Nintendo of Europe, and they have competing interests within the overall Nintendo company. And so you don't want Nintendo of Europe competing with Nintendo, Nintendo of America,
Okay.
because then they're eating each other's sales. But I don't remember where I was going with all this.
Watching
Damon
me
play video
play
games.
games. And I want to know what this reason was, because I think I was just selfish. Was there another reason?
We used to watch you. It's because the games were fun to watch, and we wanted to be playing them. That was the preferred thing. But you were playing them. Also, you were better than we were at them, probably because you never let us play them. But so it was fun to watch you play, and then try to use some of the strategies that you used to go and play. It's funny, like when my kids play and they're sitting there struggling, I'm usually like, figure it out. Back in my day, there weren't tutorials and things. You just learn how to do it.
We didn't have the Googles in my day.
And then I get thinking, like, oh yeah, I watched my older brother beat him, and he used to know how to beat him because he would find the video game
the book.
Yeah, the tips. And
They
he would
used to
read that.
sell books that would tell you how to beat a video game.
So yes, that they did. Yes, however, I own precious few of those because those were a luxury that you couldn't afford when you could barely even afford to buy the game.
You have the book or the game, and the game was preferable.
Yeah.
No, I thought I had heard that Damon was also rather colorful in his
yes.
narration of the game that he was playing.
Yeah, he would call them lots of names, or he would take it personal when some guy in Doom would shoot him in the back.
I would accuse that demon's mother of horrible things.
One of the great things to watch, even though it was also a tragedy at the same time, was that when he'd get so mad that he'd hold the controller like this, and you'd hear it start to crack and creak in his hands.
Rosalie says it was, I think it was because it was like watching a movie.
Yeah,
I wonder what kind of movie.
I don't know, like The Machinist.
What?
The protagonist in Machinist slowly descends into madness. And
All right.
yeah, the end.
Okay, next thing.
Definitely.
Or back to whatever it was you were on before the tangent.
I'm trying to decide. I've taken enough time on this topic. I'm trying to decide if I just save some of these things for later, because maybe one of you two
Okay.
need a turn.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Other than the big thing is, there are some cool things in the news for retro gaming. Stuff that eliminates some of the latency that you see. Stuff that runs the hardware, like emulates the hardware rather than the software. And there's some really cool stuff like that. But
Veronica says the movie was a tragedy.
It was a tragedy for many a controller.
there were also lots of explosions involved. I do remember that.
In the game? Or
In the
in the
living
living
room.
room?
When you've got a controller and it flies through the air and lands on the floor and bits and pieces fly everywhere. The only thing that was missing was a little bit of gasoline and some flames.
So, okay, story time. I made a gaming throne in the basement of our mother's house, and I had a couple of great big like console speakers that I put into the floor joist, in between the floor joist, pointing down, and the lazy boy right in between them, so that you could get the full effect of the, of the audio from GoldenEye. And Mother hated it because it would rattle the whole house. The whole house would sound like a machine gun battle because I fastened the speakers to the structure.
Mother was the only one who hated it.
Well, I had a couple of cheap walkie-talkies, and I had an amplifier and a sound system with speakers pointing down, and I had a brother that was taking a nap, and when he got up from his nap, he had to walk through the game room to get upstairs, and I came up with a delicious prank, and I wired up one of the walkie-talkies into my amplifier, and I went and stood outside with the other walkie-talkie, rang the doorbell so John would have to get up out of bed and go and answer the door. And when John was walking through the living room, I keyed up the walkie-talkie and yelled in it, "John!" And I blew my speakers because I turned up the amp too high.
You see, what I experienced is I was just walking through the living room, minding my own business, and I heard this heavenly voice just cause an earthquake saying my name, and I repented right there and never looked back.
That was my plan.
I need to hire you. Could use some of that.
All right.
Hey, we've got a username whose name is in Cyrillic.
Oh, wow.
It says Vom Ingo.
Oh, very cool.
So don't insult Russians.
Oh, very cool. Oh boy, my Cyrillic reading is I apologize. It's really rusty. Destova. Sorry, I apologize. My Cyrillic reading is terrible.
But
I'll have
welcome.
to. I'll have to
We're
apologize.
glad to
Yeah,
have you
welcome.
here.
Where are you from, by the way? Where are you located in the world?
Yeah, send us a text with your first international person watching, as far as we know.
Yeah.
So okay, where were we? You were going to tell us something, and then we went back and rehashed what we were already talking about before.
Boy, my
I think he was just telling us about the explosion he caused in the.
explosions, video game controllers exploding, and then speakers blowing out.
So whose turn is it now to share their geeky news?
So along those lines, Damon was never afraid to try something out without reading the specs first. He figured out how to call his friend's house and hook up a speaker directly wired into the telephone receiver and have it play on the other end. So I think it was a tape player or a gaming console or something that he directly twisted the wires together and they could play. And then they tried it with the video signal, not understanding anything about bandwidth, and just couldn't get a video signal through the telephone line.
Yeah, that did cause us a whole lot of conversation, my friend and I, trying to figure out why we could send audio over the phone lines but not video. And it wasn't until, like Ellery said, it wasn't until much later when we finally grasped the concept of bandwidth. And that just means, like, how big of a hose the telephone wire is. And video is like, it needs a pipe this big, and we were trying to smash it through a hose that big, and so we didn't get anything out the other end. But audio only needs a hose that big.
That's when you just get a bunch of your neighbors, like a whole bunch of your neighbors, to help you send the signal to a whole bunch of their neighbors.
Like a bucket brigade of video?
Yeah, exactly.
That's how that works?
Sounds worthwhile.
Well, there was something similar to that later they made 112K modems, I believe. You could do a 56K modem on a regular phone line. There was a little bit of shenanigans they did to make that work. But you could get, if I remember this correctly, back in the AOL days, you could get a 112K modem
Those
if
were
you
dark
had
days.
Yeah, if you had two phone lines. And so you could run two garden hoses. Yeah.
You know what? I think my house is wired for that kind of shenanigans, because all throughout the house I've got two little Ethernet ports, or maybe they're just phone ports everywhere, but they're useless to me for internet stuff. So I just have to rely on my Wi-Fi connection here.
So as Rosalie says, one time Damon hid downstairs and jumped out at me and said, "Boo!" in quite a calm voice. I screamed and jumped through the ceiling.
Way to ruin our house.
Yeah.
Oh, and Gimli says, "Oh, FPGA type stuff for retro gaming."
Yes, that is some of the stuff I want to talk about, but I've taken up too much time. One of you needs to share something.
Okay, my turn.
Okay.
So one of the most amazing scientific and engineering projects in a long time, or that I can think of, has been unfolding over the last month or so.
I see what you did there.
It is called the James Webb Space Telescope.
Yes, James Webb.
It is a telescope that has, roughly 7 times the resolution of the Hubble Space Telescope. And the Hubble, for all you youngsters out there, gave us some of the most amazing images of stars and galaxies and nebula and clouds of
looking
stuff.
back in time
Yeah.
in our universe.
Yeah, and looking back in time, that's an interesting concept because most people know that the universal speed limit is the speed of light, which is 3 times 10 to the 8th meters per second. Or it's
That's pretty
roughly
fast.
18,000 miles per second. If I've done the cut.
Wait, hold on. Let me think about this. The moon is 250,000 miles away from Earth, and it
Maybe
takes
I'm
2.5 seconds.
I'm an order of magnitude off, aren't I? It's a 1.5 light seconds away,
Oh, okay.
I think. So I think I'm an order of magnitude. It must be 18,000 or 180,000 miles per second.
That sounds right.
You know, look it
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
Oh, that's one way to do it.
Light
Speed of light in
Speed.
miles per hour.
miles per hour.
Correction, nebulae, according to Mark.
Boy, that's a lot of miles per hour.
No.
Wait.
Thank
no,
you,
we
Mark.
wanted miles per second.
Miles per second. Oh, right.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
186,000 miles per second.
186.
There we go.
Man, the
1,000
Monty
miles per
Python
second.
song lied to me.
What did it tell you?
1,000,000 miles per second, or so it's reckoned, something like that.
Yes. Anyway, there's a finite speed that even light can travel. So the light we see from the sun actually takes 8.3 minutes to get from the sun to us. And the sun is super close compared to even the nearest star, which I think the nearest star, is it Alpha Centauri?
Proxima Centauri. It's in that
Proxima
system.
Centauri?
But yes.
Okay. Takes, I think it's 4 light years.
Correct.
4 years for that light to get to us. So that means that it's 4 light years away from us. To see light from a star on the other side of our galaxy is something like thousands of light years away.
Yeah, like our galaxy is 100,000 light years across.
Okay.
That's what we
wow.
figure.
Yeah. And so, what'd you
Our
say?
galaxy,
100,000?
100,000, yeah.
100,000, longer than human civilization has been around, is how long it takes light to get from there to here. And we look at it, well, you can see some of it with your naked eye. The Milky Way is all light from our galaxy. So the band of light that you can see it in a really clear space at night, that's some of that light is 180,000 or 100,000 years old.
Yeah.
And that's just from our galaxy. There's billions of other galaxies out there, much further away. And so that light has been traveling for a very, very long time before it gets to us. So when you see one of those stars, you're actually time traveling in a way. You're seeing something that happened long, long ago. Sometimes,
Millions and billions.
right. Some of that light started its trip before the Earth was created, before our solar system was created. Some of that light has been traveling
That's
that
so
long.
cool to think, yeah.
And so the James Webb Space Telescope is being put out there to look at some of the oldest light that we can manage. And they hope to be able to see to within, minute time scales of when the Big Bang happened, the kind of the eruption of the universe. So anyway, the way it's going to do that. So okay, so there's so much I want to tell you. You may have seen a picture of it. It looks like Jabba's land sail barge from the episode 6 of the Star Wars movie franchise, Return of the Jedi.
It looks like his land sail barge. Didn't that just look like a boat? And
Pretty much.
Kind of looks like a
Yeah.
boat. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's got these big panels of silver reflective plastic. Basically, it's capped on tape is what it is, or capped on material that's coated in aluminum. It's got like 5 layers of those. That's its sun shield to block the light and heat from the sun. And then there's a big multi-aperture mirror. So this mirror is made up of was it like 8 or 9 hexagonal shaped gold coated mirrors. That's not just one mirror, but a bunch of different ones. When it launched, this telescope is, what is it? Something like 9 meters across, something like that. Too big to fit inside of any rocket that we make nowadays. So they made it so it would fold up to fit inside of the fairing of the rocket. And so
The fairing? What's the fairing?
the fairing is the outside part of it that makes
The
it
shell.
aerodynamic.
The shell on the top.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it had to fit within this shell, and also this sun shield that it has also had to fit inside of there. And so they did all kinds of origami type stuff to fold it up so that it would all fit in there. So after it launched, then and escaped kind of Earth's atmosphere, then it got rid of the fairing and slowly started unfolding this sun shield. And if any one of these things went wrong, the whole thing would just not work. And there's no going out in a spacesuit, in a space shuttle, to fix it, because where they're sending this is further away from the Earth than we've ever been. And you can't make a space shuttle that goes there, at least not with our current technology. And so it would just be a big pile of junk. Anyone know how much this big pile of junk would have cost, or did cost? It's not a pile of junk,
Oh,
but
geez, I
if
don't
it
remember.
was,
Like $10 trillion or something ridiculous like that. I don't know.
a little bit less, $10 billion, still a huge
order
amount.
of magnitude.
3 orders of magnitude. But still, a huge amount. I mean, I think that's about how much the Big Dig in Boston cost, where they dug tunnels under the city to put highways under there.
Wow.
And it was a huge overrun in cost.
$10 billion.
$10 billion.
Just so we can look at old light, I got fresh light right here.
Yeah, we've got light at home.
What the expiration date on that is. So it's so you can look at old light, and rather than looking in the visible spectrum, they're looking in the infrared spectrum.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because infrared light can travel through some of the clouds of interstellar dust. And I don't know all of the reasons why they use infrared instead of.
Do they use it instead, or?
Yes.
Yeah,
on
it
top
starts
of?
at about
Yes,
600 nanometers and goes out to about 25 microns. So 600 nanometers is red light, and the kind of the red part of the spectrum goes to about from 600 to about 700 nanometers. And then everything beyond that is invisible to the naked eye. And so it goes from 600 nanometers out to 25,000 nanometers. And human body heat is about 10 microns or 10,000 nanometers in wavelength.
So one of the reasons why it's infrared is because they want to look farther back in time than the Hubble telescope. And they're starting to get, this light is so old that it's been traveling for so long, and the universe has been expanding as the light's traveling, and so the wavelength of the light is getting shifted. It's redshifted. So like
right.
the whole spectrum of that light is as it's moving through this expanding universe, it's moving that spectrum lower.
So it makes sense then.
It's
that-
moving it towards red.
Yeah,
And
longer wavelengths.
yes.
And this is what's called the Doppler effect. And that's demonstrated most closely if you're standing close to a road. Yeah, or like an ambulance goes by and it goes, and the pitch seems to drop. Same thing happens with light. We don't notice it most of the time because most of us can't run fast enough to shift the light. But at interstellar
That's you.
scales,
He lost his superpowers. I haven't told you about mine.
I'm interested.
He can redshift light by running fast enough.
Right. He caught on. Anyway, go ahead.
I redshift light when I stand out in the sun too long.
Yeah.
Or I get embarrassed.
Yeah. Turn white light into bright red.
So I'd like to talk more about it, but maybe I should save some for a future episode, because how they detect the light and how all of the engineering behind it works is just really fascinating and amazing, some of the techniques that they developed. So yeah, I don't know how long have we been going? I don't know.
We've been going
About an hour.
About an hour.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
We
So
started at 7:30. So
I think we started at this time so that those insomniacs in our family could be put to sleep, and we've probably accomplished that by this time. Maybe we should open it up to our audience and say, are there any questions that they want to ask us?
there will be some latency between when we get the responses.
Right.
Well, Veronica says that I can't run that fast, but I know that if I could run that fast, let's see. Sorry, let me read it.
But if you could run that fast, it would happen.
Oh, yes,
Well, true.
I can't run that fast, but I know if I could run that fast, then it would happen.
But if he had
That's
if
my
he had two
superpower.
wheels, he would be a bicycle.
Oh.
Well,
If you could run that fast, then you could redshift light. And if you had two wheels, you would be a bicycle.
Oh, yes, true that. Thank you, Damon.
Okay.
See, I was going to say, I know that if I could run that fast, it would happen, and knowing is half the battle.
The other half of the battle is violence.
Huh. Did they teach me that
I think
on
that's what
Saturday
the
morning?
Russians used to say, isn't it?
No, that was the whole part of the battle.
Oh, right.
That's all the battle.
Their T-34 tanks.
And then again, Desitkoba. We just offended him again by my pronunciation.
It's okay, he left a while ago because he just determined it wasn't worth it.
Well, we thank you for joining us, and we're sorry if you did.
You could have used your Saturday night life a little bit better, but it's too late for that now.
Quick, give us all of your science questions right now. All of the questions that you've been dying to know, and we will make up an answer. Let's see here.
Riveting stuff. Three
Yep,
guys
look at it.
watching a screen.
So while we're waiting, well, we talked earlier about that I got LASIK recently, and so I have a habit of fixating on things that interest me, and maybe some people would say obsessing about. If I get an interest, I obsess about it for a long time and heavily. And LASIK was one of those things, and it's fascinating to me the way that it works. So my eyes, I was nearsighted because my eyes weren't shaped perfectly correct. They might have been elongated a little bit so that the focal point, like the lens in my eyes, would take the light in and focus it. And there's, sensors on the backs of your eyes, inside the hollow sphere, on the backs of the sphere, there's a sensor, a nerve, rods and cones.
Yep.
And your lenses are supposed to focus the light right to there, but mine would focus it a little bit away. And so the way we could fix it would be like by smashing my head to shape my eyes correctly, but that brings a whole bunch of other problems with it. And so the other way is
So we got the problem in the first place is from his older brother smashing his head and squishing his eyeballs out the wrong way.
So we've decided that that's not the most desirable solution for nearsightedness. And somebody, and this is the part that I wanted to get to, who was the absolute madman that was like picturing an eyeball in his head, and an eyeball that was a little too long, and he's like, I know how we can make this eye focus better. We'll burn part of the lens away with a laser. We're going to reshape the lens with a laser. We're going to shine a laser into this person's eye. A laser that's powerful enough to ablate material off from their lens.
The guy's name was Lay.
Was he really?
Yeah, and it's called LASIK because somebody said Lay is sick.
Boo. Boo. But anyway, so they can't just shine that laser right into your eye because you have the cornea that's over the eye. So they have to actually cut a flap in the cornea and peel it open. And then they shine the laser in and they reshape your lens. And so it moves the focal point so that it's in the correct spot. And then they put the cornea back over your eye. And then they don't stitch it, they don't glue it. It's just the tears keep it glued down until it heals shut.
So I don't know if it's more disturbing or less disturbing, but they used to do that same thing with razor blades.
Oh my goodness.
They would just shave the top of the lens off of the eye, and then so radial keratotomy, I think is what it was called.
Ugh. No thanks. I'll take the lasers.
Yeah. Well, and they used to also use like a fine, like a scalpel to cut the flap. Now they use another laser that cuts a different laser, and it cuts the little U-shaped flap, and then they peel it open. and it's pretty disturbing to watch, and it's also disturbing when you're laying there on the table and you can hear the laser power up and it makes kind of a high-pitched humming sound, and then you can smell burning flesh. But I had good results. I wore glasses for 35 years, and now I don't have to wear glasses. And it took me almost 6 months to get over the urge to look for my glasses immediately when I wake up in the morning. Every morning I'd wake up and I'd reach for my glasses and then remember I don't need glasses.
But in the next little while, he'll need glasses again because he'll need reading glasses.
I'll need reading glasses.
We've got some questions.
We do.
Okay, let's get to
Yeah.
that.
I have a question. What if you had a magnet? Oh, this comes from Veronica. What if we had a magnetic suit and wore it in a magnetic chamber? Could you create a kind of floating bed?
Yeah, sure. I think so.
How would you get a magnet that powerful?
Electromagnet?
It would be extremely dangerous. But
Would it be very relaxing? Because it would probably, if it's powerful enough to hold you up, it's going to be powerful enough to just hold you in place, isn't it?
you would have to control it really, really well, and you would have to take into account magnetic field gradients, because as you get closer to a magnet, the amount of force exerted by that magnet increases. I think it's exponentially, and so you could stick your arm out and all of a sudden it would get ripped off.
So this would be
dreams.
So John, this would be comfortable as long as you didn't understand the risks.
Don't stretch.
Yeah, I used to work at a pharmaceutical company, and they had giant NMR machines, nuclear magnetic resonance machines, and it had its own room where you weren't allowed to bring metal things into that room, because if the magnet got turned on while you were in there, it had a really strong magnet, it would just rip metal out of whatever was close to it, and like if you had some ferromagnetic jewelry or something on, like your finger would just be gone. And so like if you go into an NMR machine, before they do that, they'll do an x-ray, and they'll ask you, have you been working in a shop, like grinding metal or anything, have you got any metal chips in your eyes or anything like that? Because if you go into that big magnet in the tunnel and you've got metal chips in your eyes, they could forcibly be ripped out through your flesh, leaving a gaping, bleeding hole.
I don't.
I like this episode.
Thank you, Veronica. She does wonder. I've always wondered if it would squish you. Right?
Depends on which direction you made the magnetic field go. Good question. Love it.
What else do we have?
I think that was the only question that we had on there.
Well, earlier Leroy did ask about FPGAs, maybe we should circle back on that.
Okay.
And what the heck is an FPGA?
So you remember when I was talking about emulation and how there's like software emulation is how a lot of this stuff works, where you've got a machine that's trying to run software that acts like hardware, and that just introduces latency in and of itself. Obviously, CRT screen versus HDMI screen introduces latency, but sometimes just that software trying to act as hardware, even if it's less powerful, the simple fact that the hardware has to make decisions about what's running first, and it has to break things up into chunks, and then it puts a frame all together and then sends that to the screen, adds additional latency. So what an FPGA does is it's still emulation, but it's like emulation on a hardware level, where you're taking, I guess an FPGA stands for a Field Programmable Gate Array, not Gatorade.
Field Programmable Gatorade. Like, we need a little more salt in that one, a little more sugar in this one. Actually, I had Field Programmable Gatorade.
Oh, really?
Yeah, when I was training to run a marathon, I'll say a marathon instead of the marathon, as if I ran more than one. I had a big can of powdered Gatorade, so I could mix it as strong as I wanted to. Field Programmable Gatorade.
Yes, because when you're out there in the field, you can program how strong it's going to be.
So okay, I don't think that clears anything up for anybody. Field Programmable Gate Array, what the heck?
And Elroy probably knows more about these than I do, but the idea is that most chips have a very specific configuration in them, the logic configuration. They have a very specific job that they do on a board. And so when you send something to it, it does that one job, but it does it really well. A Field Programmable Gate Array, Gatorade, it takes, it's basically, again, hardware level stuff, but you can send instructions to it so that those arrays will rewrite themselves so that they can perform different logical
That's
tasks.
the field programmable part, is you can reroute the electrical signals in it, and the gates are kind of the smallest bit of logic that you can have, of computer logic. So something that will make a choice. It'll compare two signals, and based on the comparison of those two signals, put an output, and you can feed that into something else. And that's kind of the basis of all computer logic and thinking. And so you have an array of these. That's the array part of it. And so the fascinating thing about FPGAs is that rather than being limited to processing a single command at a time, you can do these massively parallel circuits.
Okay.
And so even though it may not have as much computational power as a general purpose computer, you can, for specific applications, you can get nearly instantaneous results, because it will pick it apart and then get you an answer within nanoseconds. It's amazing.
But the cool thing about them is that you can take these old video game systems, and they can fit onto these field programmable gate arrays, and you can pretty much fit in this little chip. You can pretend like it's the hardware of a Nintendo, and so when you send a signal to it, it does all the processes and spits it out as fast as a regular Nintendo would do. And so you can have it react very much like the real hardware. And so lately there have been several projects that have used this. There's one that's called the Mr. FPGA, and it's this open source crowd, well, I was going to say crowd programmed, but that's what open source means, right? But an open source project where everybody's coming, and not everybody, people who are interested in these things and have knowledge in FPGAs.
Everybody who's cool.
Yeah.
Be there.
Everybody's adding a little bit here and there, creating different cores for it. So you'll have a Nintendo core, you'll have a Sega core, you'll have, like the ZX Spectrum. Say it properly. Somebody from Europe might get after me for calling it the ZX Spectrum. But all these different cores, and on the fly you can switch it out so that here you've got Nintendo hardware, but then you choose Sega, and you switch over to the Sega hardware, and it's acting almost identical. Of course, it depends on how well somebody's written the schematics for the FPGA to use, but you can get very accurate hardware emulation going on.
Oh, that's cool. I like it. I don't know. For me, this is such a. It's cool. It's like video game archaeology. It's to me like this is so cool.
I love it. I love showing this stuff to my kids, like showing the games that I grew up with and that I loved. I love showing that to my kids.
Nice.
And so this kind of stuff is cool. I just don't have the money to go buy an FPGA card at this time. Maybe sometime in the future, but right now it just seems a little excessive. But.
Well, I think it's about time that we cut this off.
We probably exceeded that limit a
Yeah.
while ago.
Thank you. If you've stuck around this long with us, we really appreciate you. Those of you who didn't stick around this long, we appreciate that you showed up too.
And it actually was really fun to have real time feedback to it. That was,
I like
fun.
this format,
Yeah.
Me too.
So
and we don't have to do any editing. So this is the best format.
All right.
Thank you very much. Anything else that we need to say?
Breaks optional.
And thanks to our sponsor. None of them have shown up yet, but if you'd like to be a sponsor, we won't say no. And we might question your sanity. Thank you.
Goodbye. Awesome.